I'm Jamarius.
And I'm Kit, and welcome to Lesson 9 of our Huntsville.
We have a lot of great old historic buildings in Huntsville.
In today's lesson, you'll get to see everything from old historic homes to churches and cemeteries.
You'll even learn a few fun facts.
Today's vocabulary words that you need to look for are
antebellum,
architecture,
circuit rider,
congregation,
immigrants,
religions,
meridian,
sanctuary,
synagogue, and residence.
And now here's our host, Tim Hall, with your lesson.
Thanks, kids. Religious freedom was one of the reasons that immigrants came to this country. The leaders who wrote the Constitution made it clear that it was a citizen's right to worship freely. The early settlers brought their varied faiths and religions into the new territory. Children used the Bible to learn to read, and parents used the Bible to pass on their religious beliefs. Early religious congregations often met in family homes because they had no sanctuary or synagogue. Sometimes a traveling preacher would hold services for the rural families. He was also called a circuit rider. The First Baptist Church of Huntsville began in the early 1800s. According to historians, the church was the first established church in Alabama. Today, this church is an impressive landmark with its mosaic architecture and bell tower. The First United Methodist Church built a sanctuary in 1832. During the Civil War, when Northern troops used the church as a hospital, an accidental fire burned the church down. The current building was completed on the same property in 1870. Slave owners often brought their slaves to church with them. After the Civil War, many freed slaves formed their own congregations. The Huntsville African Church was founded by Reverend William Harris. His son, Reverend Bartley Harris, ministered at the church for 50 years. In 1907, the church changed its name from St. Bartley to St. Bartley Primitive Baptist Church. The original church and graveyard was built on the land that is now home to Huntsville Hospital. St. Bartley is currently located in northwest Huntsville. Huntsville's Episcopal Church, Church of the Nativity, was built in 1859. This building is considered one of the region's best preserved pieces of Gothic architecture. When Huntsville was occupied by Union troops during the Civil War, they did not stable their horses inside this church because of the building's beauty and the inscription over the front door, "Reverence my sanctuary," which means honor God's house. An Irish priest founded St. Mary's Church of the Visitation in 1860. Father Jeremiah Frederick Tracy encouraged builders to use rock from Monte Sano in building the church. 18 men founded Huntsville's first Jewish congregation in 1876. The new congregation was called B'nai Shalom, which in Hebrew means sons of peace. First Presbyterian Church began in 1818. The current building was completed in 1860. In addition to their faiths, the early settlers also brought rich heritages filled with a variety of culture and tradition. Huntsville has one of the largest and best preserved antebellum neighborhoods in the entire country. These unique characteristics are visible in the city's historic homes. The word antebellum refers to the time before the Civil War. Many of these homes are brick. Builders used talented craftsmen and slaves to form the bricks at the building site. The walls are often 2 to 3 feet thick. The strength of these immense walls has contributed to the longevity and durability of these antebellum homes. Huntsville's founding father, Leroy Pope, built one of the grandest homes in the region. The Pope Mansion is a large white structure that looks almost like an ancient Greek temple. George Steele used Greek architecture as his inspiration. Remember that Leroy Pope's son sold the waterworks to the city with the condition that the big spring would be preserved. Leroy Pope sold a piece of his property to his good friend Josiah Cox. The two eventually got into an argument and became bitter enemies. Josiah Cox's home is now called the Spite House because Cox built giant 18-foot and 14-foot ceilings throughout the home. These high ceilings made the Cox home so tall that it blocked Leroy Pope's view of the city. Charles Cabness was one of the first to purchase land in the new town. Cabness eventually went on to also build the state's first cotton gin on the Flint River. The Cabness home is on Randolph Street. Dr. Thomas Fern, the city leader who helped establish the city's water system, completed his beautiful home in 1820. Dr. Fern's home is on Franklin Street. It is considered an excellent example of Federal-style architecture. Many of the panes of glass in the windows are the same panes of glass that Dr. Fern ordered for his new home so long ago.
My name is Howard Whedon. That's Miss Howard Whedon too. I was born in 1847. I was a very talented artist. Back in my day, it was not cool for women to do fabulous things and get famous for them. But I came up with a plan. I used my middle name, Howard, to sign my paintings so that people would think I was a male artist and I could sell my work. I painted gorgeous portraits of black slaves.
The Whedon House on Gate Street now serves as a historic museum. Dr. William Whedon built the home. His daughter, Maria Howard Whedon, became a well-known artist and poet. The museum has several pieces of her work on display. The Thomas Bibb home on Williams Avenue is another antebellum home. Its large white columns and wide porch blends the new styles of America with ancient Greek revival architecture. Thomas Bibb was the state's second governor.
Hello, darlings. My name is Tallulah Bankhead. I became a famous movie star. I acted in many films with leading actors such as Humphrey Bogart. My birthplace was in the upstairs of the Schiffman building in 1902. That is a building that still stands on the east side square facing the Madison County Courthouse.
The Schiffman building on the corner of the square is now home to several business offices, but it was once also a residence. In fact, one of the state's most memorable movie stars, Tallulah Bankhead, was born on the second floor. Her father went on to Washington, D.C. to become a powerful congressman. Bankhead Parkway is named after him. The Wilcoxon home on Franklin Street has a beautiful double staircase that leads to the front porch. This style of home is called a raised cottage. On Adams Street, the old Smith Academy is now a family home. Dr. Carlos G. Smith opened the building as a school after the Civil War. The McDowell Chase home on Adams Street is better known as the Backwards House. William McDowell had to leave town on business as the home was being built. When he returned almost 2 years later in 1848, he realized the home was being built backwards. The back of the house faces Adams Street. The construction crew misread the plans. Later, columns and a porch were added to help conceal the mistake. Union troops occupied this home during the Civil War. Their sword marks on the columns are still visible today. The Mayhew Balch Thomas home is best known for its visitors. Miss Sue Chadwick, a Confederate general's daughter, hid a Union soldier in the cellar to keep him from being taken prisoner by the Confederate Army. Later, they fell in love and got married. Many of the residents of Huntsville's historic homes are buried here in Maple Hill Cemetery. In 1818, the city of Huntsville bought 2 acres of land from Leroy Pope to build the cemetery. They gave him $75. Cemetery is much larger today because additional land has been purchased throughout the years. Maple Hill is one of Alabama's oldest cemeteries. 5 Alabama governors and many Confederate soldiers are among those buried there.
And we have individuals buried here from the wars of 1812, 1814, Spanish American, and of course a lot of the Civil War soldiers. We also have Union soldiers that are buried here. And then of course our other wars such as the Spanish American, World War I, World War II, Vietnam and Desert Storm. Our second governor, Thomas Bibb, had a son named William, who was to be married to Mary Chambers at the time. She was to become Mrs. Bibb. And the story that all the children seem to remember and know is that Mary died a very unfortunate death. And there is a mausoleum here in Maple Hill. And the rumor, I can't tell you the whole story because it's a wonderful legend and we don't know exactly the truth of it, but we do know that Mary Bibb is buried in this mausoleum.
Each spring in Maple Hill Cemetery, some of Huntsville's early residents are portrayed by living interpreters. These interpreters or actors tell interesting stories or facts about Huntsville's historical people who are buried there. The tallest monument in Maple Hill is the Huntsville Meridian Marker. This marker was built by Richard Anderson, an early operator of riverboats, in memory of his family and to preserve the meridian. A meridian is a line of longitude used to locate places and to measure distances between places. This monument is important because all of the land in Huntsville and North Alabama is measured from this meridian. Another landmark in Huntsville history is Glenwood Cemetery, where many African American citizens of Huntsville were buried. The cemetery had been neglected until recently, when students from the Academy for Science and Foreign Language worked to restore this cemetery and the memory of many of those who were buried here.
This is the Alabama African American Historic Project. It was started by students at the Academy for Science and Foreign Language in 1993. It has been an ongoing project for the last 8 years.
My name is Dr. Burgess E. Scruggs. I was born a slave in 1860. I was fortunate to attend a school for black children in the basement of Lakeside Methodist Episcopal Church. I loved learning so much that I became a doctor, the first African American doctor in Huntsville.
Some noteworthy citizens buried at Glenwood are Burgess Scruggs, the first African American physician in Huntsville, C.C. Moore, a postman whose home is still standing on Pulaski Pike.
He actually had to teach himself to read so that he could get the job. He actually worked as a postman for 33 years, delivering mail all along the West Huntsville route to the black community.
Daniel S. Brandon, one of the first African American city council members.
In 1879, he and Thomas Townsend were the first African Americans in this city to be elected to the city council. They were called aldermen.
Henry C. Benford, an educator.
He was an educator, principal of William H. Council High School, and appointed by the President of the United States to become Register of the Land Office in Huntsville. He was a journalist and owner of the Weekly Gazette, a local newspaper.
And Charles Henley Jr., editor of the Huntsville Gazette. Now, here are the Our Huntsville kids with a review.
And now here's a look back at today's vocabulary.
Antebellum, a period of time before the Civil War.
Architecture, the art and science of planning and creating buildings.
Circuit rider, a traveling preacher that held services for rural families.
Congregation, the members of a church.
Immigrants, people who leave home to live in a new country.
Religions, systems of worship involving belief in a supreme being.
Meridian, a division of Earth's surface used for measurement.
Sanctuary, the building used for worship.
Synagogue, a Jewish house of worship. And resident, a person who lives in a certain place.
And now back to our host, Tim.
Join us next time when we will take a look at the Civil War in the Valley. For Our Huntsville, I'm Tim Hall.